Welcome to The Fully Lived Life, a podcast for those who are longing to pursue the full life and want to break free from anything that holds them back. Listen in as two friends, a psychologist, Dr. Mary, and a life coach, Gillian, talk about life, love, and purpose through the lens of faith, science, psychology, and life experiences.
Hello, Mary.
Hi, Gillian.
You know, I got to tell you, in our last session, last episode, you threw in a bit of a challenge to us to try to be more authentic, live more authentically. Yeah. And I immediately got off the podcast episode and I thought, I maybe should have a support group for all the eights that are going to try this. Maybe I could get a side gig. Eights in need of support for this podcast's coaching and therapy tips.
Well, as a friend who adores you, I love your fierce, funny, out there mega 8 personality. And actually, because I've seen you in all sorts of different, I'm putting her on the spot. Here comes Stella. I've seen you in all sorts of contexts, and I've seen you be very careful in what you say. And I'm not saying that that's incorrect to do that. But when you go full out Gillian and the light is shining and you're like,
Yeah, but you can say that because you love me.
Yeah, but the reason why I love you is not just because I'm a loving, it's because you're lovable in your true self. Like, honestly, come on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, eights, we could do it, man.
You totally can.
We can band together and cheer each other on, and we can do this.
Yes. Every single one of the numbers. I mean, we all have our quirks, you know?
This is very true. And, you know, the more coaching I do with all the different numbers, the more similarities and the more differences I see, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us what we're going to talk about today, because I know we're kind of doing a follow-up to our previous episode.
Yes. I hope
that's quite exciting.
Yeah, I hope the last episode was thought-provoking for you and got you thinking. Today, we're going to talk about show up anyway. Oh. There's that challenge right there in the title. Okay, episode's over. No. I'd love to hear what acts of courage you lived out this week based on our conversation last week. I'd love to hear that. So what does it mean for you to feel the pressure to pretend or fit in, but you instead choose to show up anyway? What does that mean for you? Can you think of an example maybe where...
here goes Stella again.
Yeah. Well, I already put you on the spot. And let's channel your full-out 8 beauty.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Well, just think about a time where you felt the pressure to fit in.
Yeah.
Or pretend. And you still chose to show up anyway.
Okay, you want to hear a really funny one?
Sure.
So my husband and I used to go to a lot of concerts. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's 2 funny ones, actually. My husband and I used to go to a lot of concerts.
I'm laughing already. I know it's going to be fun.
And we're at this concert, and the band is like an amazing band. Mm-hmm. And the people in front of us were smoking dope. Oh. And it was bugging me because, like, it was in my face, right? Mm-hmm. And so I tapped the guy in the shoulder. Okay. And I said, would you mind putting that out, please?
How big was he?
He did. He was a big guy. He did put it out. But at the same time, like, poor Bruce thought I was going to get my lights punched out, or he was going to get his lights punched out. One or the other.
There you go.
So that's one story.
Yes.
This is the funny stories of Gillian. Mm-hmm. The second story was my sister Jennifer and I, took a trip to Ireland, and we were sitting, all the local pubs have the nightly session where musicians come in and just kind of go for it. Mm-hmm. And we'd been sitting in this booth because we really wanted to hear this one performer. His name is Davy Spillane. He's a piper. He's unbelievable. So we booked our table. We got there early, and these women came in, and they stood right in front of our table, blocking our view of the band. Uh-huh. And I'm looking at my sister,
How
and I'm
dare they?
I'm getting hot under the collar.
Yes.
So I just tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, hey, listen, we would be glad to switch spaces with you, okay? You sit, we'll stand in front of you. We almost got into a fight over that one, but it worked out well.
Okay. Okay.
So
there you go.
That's the funny bit of when my 8 shows up, kind of like for kind of the justice, don't smoke in my face and don't stand in front of me.
Right.
But there have definitely been many others.
Yes. Well, I know personally you've had to do and say some really brave things. That's been vulnerable. It's been hard for you to do. And that's the thing is we don't do it perfectly. We don't do it all the time. But how can we, and this is a challenge to you and I as well as our listeners and viewers, how can we show up anyway?
Yeah.
So Brene Brown did some research on women. And so this is what she found. In her research on authenticity and shame, she found that speaking out is actually a major shame trigger for women.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Yeah. So this is what they found, the part of the struggles of being authentic. And I'm like, check, check, check. So don't make people feel uncomfortable.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
But somehow we have to not make people feel uncomfortable, but also be honest. So that's a lot of navigating we have to do.
So instead, what we do is we make ourselves uncomfortable.
Yes. Okay, here's another one. Don't upset anyone or hurt anyone's feelings, but say what's on your mind.
Well, how do you do that?
Right. Or sound informed and educated, but not like a know-it-all. Or don't say anything unpopular or controversial, but have the courage to disagree with the crowd.
I'm sorry, but all those,
Yeah,
like you're walking a tightrope.
exactly. So that's why we spend so much time in our head micromanaging what we say, which then ends up stopping us from saying the things that need to be said because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We don't want to create conflict. We don't want to make anybody unhappy with us. Like, for example, I absolutely hate when anyone's angry with me. So I will walk around on eggshells and bend over backwards to avoid that. But then what happens is I don't end up speaking up. Like I am learning for myself the art of being able to actually express my true feelings. First of all, even to know how I feel, let alone to express it. So I'm listening to your stories of the women and the pub and all that, and I'm admiring you because I would have probably just been sitting there muttering to my sister and not actually confront, and they would have turned and looked at me and I would have smiled at them. Hi, how are you? Be all fakey. So my old self. My new self, I'm learning to be able to be honest, direct, speak my mind, share my opinions. But I think the key is to be able to do it with grace. Like it's not about being nice, it's about being kind.
And, I totally agree with that because in an unhealthy 8, when they get triggered, about some kind of injustice or, being taken advantage of, they can swing so far the other way that they're mean and cruel.
Yeah.
And that's, we don't want to go there either. But I was, we were talking a little bit earlier. We were talking about Greta Thunberg. I mean, she's this young activist. She's a young woman, and she's calling out the global leaders about the climate change crisis. And the way she did it the other day, I had such admiration for her. She was calling out and she's saying, "Oh, you talk about the climate crisis, blah blah blah. You talk about fossil fuels, blah blah blah." And I thought, wow, she's really calling them on the carpet in such a way that's garnering a lot of attention. But it's true because it's lip service. And when it's lip service, it sounds like blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So how do we balance between speaking the truth, but coating it with grace so that we don't end up looking like a jerk, but we also don't look like a pussycat sort of like shrinking back.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on the audience. Like I'm thinking about Henry Cloud. I can't remember the book that he wrote, but he talked about sort of the three groups of people. You've got the healthy person who can handle truth. And yeah, they may have some reactions. They may get defensive, but they can push through it and they're teachable and they genuinely want to do better. Then you have somebody he calls the fool. And the fool is no matter how many times you correct them, they on surface go, yeah, and they sound like they're listening, but then they go back to their foolish ways. And then the third group he calls the evil people, who no matter what, they are absolutely not teachable. They're not at all willing to own their stuff, and they're not at all willing to change. So if I'm going to really invest in speaking up, I need to think about my audience and who I'm actually talking to.
That's a really good point, because knowing your audience, and that goes back to our previous podcast episode, where if it's someone you don't respect, if it's someone you're never going to go to for advice, you don't have a connection with, why are we putting so much weight on their words?
Exactly.
So I think that's a really, really key thing, is who am I dealing with?
Exactly. And, Scripture has a verse about not throwing pearls to swine. Yeah. And so your words of truth are like pearls, and you want it to land in places where it's going to make a difference. So just being wise even about it, I think that show up anyway is to be able to say, I want to tell you off, or I want to speak truth to you, but I know you can't handle it. You can't handle the truth. AKA Jack Nicholson, if you haven't seen that movie. What's it called again?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Google it. Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson. Amazing movie. So think about that, because there's only so many battles you can fight. There's only so many causes you can speak up about. So do it wisely. So that's sort of a side note. But what's interesting is the research on the attributes that we consider feminine is for women to be thin, nice, and modest. So if women want to play it totally safe, it means we have to be willing to stay small, quiet, and attractive as possible.
That's a tall order.
Well, not only that, it's not actually truly what's feminine. I think about our episode a few weeks ago where we're talking about your voice and feeling like it was unfeminine because it's not small or quiet, right? No. And the things that we perceive. Now, for men, when we look at the attributes for masculinity, the researchers found that for men, it's emotional control, achievement in work, control over women, and pursuit of status. Isn't this horrible? So if that means if men want to play it safe, they need to stop feeling, start earning, and give up on meaningful connection.
That's a lonely old island, isn't it?
Isn't it? So if we can let go of that and show up anyway, what does that mean? And as a woman, kind of going back to what the research was saying about being small, quiet, and attractive, I guess the word would be to be nice. I mean, how many of us, even as, now be nice, and that's this voice in our head. But frankly, being nice is not a fruit of the Spirit. No, it's not. It's not even in the Bible. It's all about kindness. So how can we set boundaries with kindness? And how can we speak truth? We just mentioned that. So yes, I need to show up anyway and be braver in what I have to say, but my freedom to speak ought to not cause harm to others. Now, sometimes it may hurt them because they are hearing things that they don't want to hear, but I'm contrasting difference between hurt versus harm. Yes. Right? So what we do ought to not create harm to others. That is not what we're asked to do. So there's this mantra that I think is really helpful. Before you're going to speak, before you're going to do something, use the think. THINK. And I've shared this before, but it's a good reminder. So is it true? Mm-hmm. T for true. Is it helpful? Is it inspirational? Is it needed? And is it kind? So before I open my mouth, is this true, first of all? Is this helpful? Is this inspirational? Is it necessary that I even speak up? Is it needed? Yeah. And is it kind? So that can be sort of our way to balance where we can show up anyway, but at the same time, we're doing it in a kind way that is for the edification or the betterment of others. And
that
being aware that
takes,
they're open to it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of thinking already going behind the scenes here. I mean, this is where we have to, especially for the 8s and those that of us that react from the gut.
Yeah.
Right? When we get stirred up in our gut and we react. So this is where we have to go, think of who my audience is.
Yeah.
Number one. And then I've got to take time to think, as you said, about how I'm going to say it, deliver it, and be kind and do no harm in the process.
Exactly.
So, I think of how slow we need to get inside to quieten our mind, to work through that process, which is really, really good because as, we point out in the training of first responders, you have to switch from the emotional part of the brain to the thinking part of the brain.
Right.
And when we can do that, we can cool those hot emotions down and be more kind in our delivery of even a tough truth.
Exactly. The thing is, too, unless there's disaster around the corner or somebody is dying in front of you, you very rarely have to speak immediately. So if you're feeling a very strong response and you're feeling like, I need to say something, it's okay to step away for a few moments, calm yourself down. We've talked about this, the 90-second rule.
Yeah.
And for me as a person of faith, to pray through the wisdom of what I'm going to say, I also pray about, Lord, can you open the heart of the other person and prompt me when the timing is right? Like just spending the time to do that. So back to this friend I mentioned in the last episode who was having this situation at work. She had a meeting scheduled with her boss. Well, she couldn't even talk about that meeting with us without breaking into tears and getting so upset. So we talked about pulling away and actually, in fact, writing an email where she was able to clearly state her thoughts, sending that to him in advance. So it's just being able to take the time to do that, I think is really, really key.
So time is a gift to us in these situations because, as you said, 90 seconds is not a lot of time, but it's enough to get us in control.
Right. And for those of us who are conflict avoidant, and I would say I am too, sometimes when I take time away and I cool down, I actually start to lose the motivation to speak up. And that's when I have to show up brave and show up anyway, because I know something needs to be said, a boundary needs to be set. Yeah. And so I need to do that. Again, back to that challenge of speaking up, you don't ever want to come from a place of carelessness about harm to others, but you also don't want to get so deadened and hardened against what people think that you're closing your heart and you're not letting yourself be vulnerable. Some of my most powerful moments of truth telling comes from a place of love and vulnerability, where instead of telling the other person why I'm angry with them, I talk about my hurt and my longings in that relationship. And it just goes so much better when I'm able to do it from that standpoint. So I've got a definition of authentic living. Can I share it with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So finding our true selves has become the call of authentic living. But this is where we can get it wrong and inadvertently pursue the wrong things. Because living out of our true selves isn't just about becoming. It's about unbecoming all the things we believed we had to be loved.
Oof.
Yeah, it's not about another thing that we have to do, to strive for, or achieve to earn our worth and lovability. Who we really are is always there, waiting to be seen and invited out, for our pain to be healed, and for safe spaces where our self-protection can be set down and we can finally emerge. So let's invite each other to embrace our brokenness and human frailties, to find the courage to show up anyway.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, so that's my definition. It's a little long, but I do have wordy tendency. But the part that I really want to stress is like our true self is already there, waiting to be invited out. And the reason why our true self went into hiding was because of our hurt, our difficult experiences. Like, I believe that we really are made in God's image very, very uniquely. And we get to just like show off his glory when we're living out of our true self. And the world needs to see us show up in our true self. But because of our experiences through life, we get hurt, we get shamed, we get rejected. Our true self goes into hiding.
Yeah.
And so we need to be able to be brave. Well, first of all, to pursue healing. We've talked about this before, to be aware of, the experiences we've had and how it's shaped us, to break through the mental agreements, the lies, all the things that we talk about in our podcasts. But like recognizing that our tendency to hide and self-protect comes from a place of fear. And when we're unaware of it, we will tend to live out a performative place where we're always trying to get people's approval, where we're trying to meet that next goal, where we're trying to do better. And unfortunately, all that does is, yes, it protects our fragile sense of self, but it kind of keeps us trapped in living out of our shadow self. And it can limit our full potential because it's rooted in fear. And the Bible talks about perfect love casts out all fear. So what does that mean? Like, we're not to live in fear. And if I'm reacting out of fear, I can already guarantee it that there's some shadow self-protection that's happening. So if, back to being self-compassion, if we can recognize that fear and shame and anger is our soul's way of telling us that what we've been through. It allows us to have self-compassion for our stories and our human frailties. And this then allows us to be cared for by God, by ourselves, by our loved ones, so that we can start to heal and our true self can start to emerge. So it's a little bit different from some of the thinking of our true self has to be developed. And it's not that we don't continue to grow and become truer versions of ourselves, but that it has a lot to do with that hiddenness that we need to break through and start to show up anyway. I hope that makes sense. I mean,
it does. Pardon me. I'm getting such a strong visual on this one. I love watching a good rescue story. And there's an Instagram account called the Dodo, and they're always showing a rescue story. And I was watching this chimpanzee that had been rescued from the bush, and its mother had been killed for bushmeat. And they brought this little chimpanzee, and it was emaciated. It was in fear. It was just shut down.
Yeah.
And they brought it in, and these beautiful people nurtured it and cared for it and showed it so much love and protection that it started to open up. And then it started to play. And then it started to do the things that chimpanzees should do, right?
Right.
And finally, it was released to the wild, like into a safe compound. But watching it go from this fear-based, shut down, less than, there was no essence of the chimpanzee there.
Yeah, right.
There was a frightened being. And then watch it just come to life.
Right.
And play and have joy and get tickled and tickle. It was just, and you've seen these rescue stories with dogs that have been abused or abandoned, and how they just turn around and they become this, what they were created to be.
Oh, I love that. Oh, what a great picture. I can already see it.
I'm just thinking of that, how when we allow fear to grip us and we allow those hurts to grip us, we can't be who we were created to be. We're masked, we're veiled, we're shadowed. Right. We're curled up within ourselves. And so that was such a strong visual that came as you were speaking.
That's a great imagery. And I would say as humans, the disadvantage we have over chimpanzees is that we're so much better at hiding our brokenness from others and from ourselves. So a lot of times when you meet people who are all about bravado and showing off and all of that, they're actually that scared little chimpanzee, and they feel like they have no choice but to do this, chest beating thing.
Yeah.
When they're not actually really secure in who they are. So I love that image. If we can, as we can easily have compassion for a hurting animal, or, a pet or even a child, as adults, can we have compassion for our hurting selves and recognize that she or he is hiding because of having experienced pain and rejection and maybe trauma, and that person is there to be invited out. And we need to create safety for that. And that comes through safety with ourselves, with others, and if we're people of faith, with God, for sure. And it's a whole journey. Like, I'm not minimizing the work that's involved with that, but I think if you can even grapple with that and the one great thing is you really actually have a lot of say and control over how your life and healing happens. But the hard part is the work that's involved. One of the hardest part is facing the darkness within ourselves. That if I can be honest, I do this thing because I want to be loved by people, because I want to protect myself, as opposed to I'm doing it because I'm supposedly trying to save the world. If I can be honest with myself about that, then I can start to be free of being controlled by that shadow self.
Yep. Oh, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So, therapeutic tip is a general one that I want to give today as you've been listening to this podcast and you're feeling either triggering, or you're feeling conviction, or you're feeling any sort of emotional response to what we've just talked about today, then I want you to just spend some time leaning into it and just ask your soul. And if you're a person of faith, ask the Lord, what's going on in me? What is the longing that's starting to emerge? Or what is the hurt that's there? And just letting yourself pay attention to that. It's not about finding solutions. It's not about trying to figure it out. Because as soon as you try to go into figuring out, you're going into your head. This is not it. This is about opening yourself up to the possibility that there is a vulnerable person inside of you that is wanting to break free, and just giving permission for that journey to begin. Yeah.
That's really good. Mm-hmm. I would say for the life coaching tip, again, leveraging previous experiences in our own lives. Mm-hmm. You asked me when I kind of showed up as, brave or whatever, courageous. Yeah. I would ask our listeners, when have you shown up to either set a boundary for yourself, maybe it's a boundary for another person. You've stepped in and set a boundary for someone else too.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe you've advocated for someone when they couldn't advocate for themselves. If you can think of that, try and think of yourself for sure, because we always want to go from strength to strength. So think about that, and possibly think about a relationship where you're sort of on those eggshells and you're not showing up with that think. Mary, could you walk us through that again?
Yeah. So T stands for true.
Yep. So what's true that you need to address?
Right. And H stands for helpful. So is it going to be helpful for you, for the other person, for your relationship?
Right.
Is it inspirational? And inspirational is one of those big words, but inspiration is about movement towards change.
Yes.
That you are hoping and longing for better in the other person and in your relationship.
Right.
Is it necessary? Is it needed? Is it something that you need to do for their breakthrough, for your breakthrough, for the relational breakthrough? And of course, is it kind?
Right. So how can you step out into something where you know that you need to walk that road and think it through, take the time and space to do that, and then maybe put a date on the calendar, like by the end of the year, I want to have this conversation with this person.
Right.
And I want to leverage the strength where I've shown up before to do that, because I know this is the right thing for me and probably the right thing for our relationship.
Amazing. And, practice along the way. So you've got that conversation that you need to have. It's that big conversation that's you've been afraid to have. So practice showing up anyway in small ways along the way. And you're going to develop a resilience to say, hey, I can do this. And by the way, practice with people you trust. You can even like play it out in an actual conversation, like just practice it.
So, Mary, one of my clients who's is very confrontational avoidant.
Yes.
And he's a team leader, and he has to have some hard conversations. And this is what we do in our coaching sessions.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about the problem, we talk about these things, and then he has to tell me, as if I were that person, what is going on. And by the time he gets to the situation where he needs to do it, he's already practiced it several times.
Exactly.
So he's more likely to follow through.
That's right. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in.
That was good stuff, Mary. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you later.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Fully Lived Life podcast. We hope you found it encouraging and helpful. Be sure to follow or subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. And if you enjoyed our show, please help spread the word by sharing with your friends and family and posting on your social media. Thanks for listening, and tune in to our next episode.